with recovering populations, it sounds like it's somewhat reasonable to expect even more white sharks along the California coast. Now in Western Australia, they think they've seen more white sharks. They've had a little bit of a spike in fatal incidences with the sharks, and they've responded by killing the animals that they just had a program for them to recover.
It shocks me. It still shocks me. So what they're seeing in Australia is very akin to what we've seen here in the U.S., right? So they've also experienced ecosystem recovery in the form of their marine mammals have come back.
Yep.
And with that and protection for white sharks, it's a no-brainer. I mean, that was the reason why they put that legislation in place, was to protect white shark populations that are sensitive to overfishing. And it did exactly what they wanted it to do. It brought not just white shark populations back, but the other populations back that white sharks are relying on. So now that you get what you originally intended to do, your solution is to go out and kill a bunch of them? That's ridiculous.
Well, some people are mad at conservationists and saying that they're responsible for people dying because we brought back the seals, which brought back the sharks.
People are responsible for people dying. I mean, the reality of it is, when you go in the ocean, it's a wild place. You have to accept the risks of what come with that. Nobody else should be responsible for your safety when you go in the ocean.
How do you explain the difference of our reaction to our own fair share of fatalities in California to their reaction in Western Australia?
Well, I mean, that's the great thing about California. I don't think California that would ever be considered. I mean, we've had our share of fatalities due to white sharks. That's never, ever been broached. You know, I lived in Hawaii for 7 years.
Has it even been proposed?
No.
Wow.
Not to my knowledge, not in California. But living in Hawaii for 7 years, while there were fatal incidents there, you know, the state of Hawaii has had shark control programs in the past. They killed 5,000 sharks in a year and a half, and they saw no measurable difference.
Right.
So, I mean, the point of those things is you could fish a shark population down to nothing, and one shark coming through could create that situation. And what are you going to do? You can't catch every last one. And in doing that, you just continue to do damage to the ecosystem.
People just feel better that they're at least trying to get rid of the sharks. It's like a false sense of security, I feel. And they're accepting the death of these animals so that they can feel better.
Yeah, but I mean, in the reality of it, it doesn't really make them safer. It doesn't.
Should governments be held responsible for giving people the sense that they're safer when in fact they are not?
Well, I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, we have all sorts of things that we buy that are designed to make us feel safer but aren't, like insurance, right? So the bottom line is, by and large, we have populations that are no longer good at assessing risk, or more importantly, accepting it. So this is one of those situations. And of course, I realize, you know, you're talking about economies at risk, you know, entire communities at risk from bad publicity. But that's short-sighted, in my opinion. There are ways to take those situations and deal with those situations. And in California and Hawaii, the great thing is we spend a lot of time, biologists, talking with resource managers, talking with water safety officials, to come up with plans to understand, what do you do when something happens? What are your protocols? What are your procedures? And to get water safety people thinking along those lines is really good, because that then starts to interface with their public outreach and their public education.
But first you have to shift focus from putting your resources towards killing the animal towards educating people.
I mean, that's the best place to put your money, in my opinion. So, you know, there have been talk of, you know, various shark repellents that you could put out, shark screens and things like that. You know, for me, they're like a cheap condom. You know, 9 times out of 10 it works great, but the one time it doesn't, you're kind of screwed. So the bottom line is, you can spend a lot of money on those sorts of things, and it only takes one incident, and then you're back to where you were before. Whereas if you start changing people's attitudes and you get them understanding the risks that they face when they go in the ocean, it's still sad and it's still unfortunate, but it doesn't become a political issue.
So no way, even let's say that we have a spike of 7 fatalities in 1 year in Southern California. Not even then would you see mitigation?
I don't think so. Different attitude here. So,
which is a weird thing to say, considering that Australia, to the world, that I used to think was an ocean, peaceful, loving place.
Right, but remember, that's not all of Australia that was doing that. That was Western Australia that was doing that.
Well, except that other places have actually been doing it the last 30 years, and we've kind
Queensland,
of forgotten about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. Those programs, you know, they are getting to the stage now where I think a lot of those places are starting to say, can we afford to keep doing this? And what is the balance between the cost and the ecological damage that we do?
It's interesting how we managed to get rid of the gill nets here by seeing all the images of the dead, cute animals that we care about. I tell you, I've seen some horrific stuff of Eastern Australia's drumlines and nets killing exactly those animals.
Sure. But that's the difference, right? So the public looks at some animals and says, oh, I feel bad for them because, you know, they're smart, intelligent. Those marine mammals, they don't look at sharks that way. That's just been a PR image that hasn't fully changed just yet.